Hey there, Sean. Welcome to the episode here today, and excited to talk on this topic around a guide to working effectively with your development partner. Excited to dive into this topic here with you today.
Yeah, it's great to chat with you again, man.
Perfect. Let's kind of start off with, at a high level, when someone kicks off with you and they begin an engagement. What are some of the first things that you would say or you look towards for companies to just try to make sure that a new kind of partner relationship kicks off on a good foot?
Yeah, I think it's kind of there's two steps there. It's like I guess pre-work in terms of before we even become a form of partnership. It's like making sure everything is aligned in terms of from like the scope of work in terms of like deliverables that are expected from both sides, and then as well as who's going to be doing what, who's responsible for what. So we get as much of that out of the way as possible before even getting going with a new partner. So that's like the pre-work. But then once we get started, there's a lot of what we call our initial discovery and strategy or onboarding phase, which is really depending on the complexity of the project or product or company and what our initial kind of objectives are, it will dictate what we do there. But more or less, like the main goals are to understand what our partner is really looking for. Understand the industry if we haven't worked in it before. Understand the specific terminology, things of that nature that we may not know, and then vice versa, getting our partner up to speed in terms of how we're exactly going to be working with them on a day-to-day basis or week-to-week basis, depending on how much we're checking in with them and whatnot. But it's more to get everybody comfortable, understand the next, like the landscape, timelines, goals, etc. And then from there, we just start digging into the actual pieces of discovery and strategy. If we're doing a full in depth, which is more like we're digging into their market, we're digging into if they have a product, we're digging into that feature set. If they don't have a product, we generally have a feature set that we're going through and basically either doing validation of that and or taking that and trying to enhance it and differentiate them from competitors through a number of different processes, whether it's just surveying, user interviews, doing competitor analysis, competitive analysis, but doing a lot of data analysis before we design anything, write a line of code, anything. So it's cheaper. It's much cheaper to do a lot of this research versus code something and then iterate on it and pivot once you develop something and put it on market. So we tend to focus on doing as much upfront work as possible that's going to prevent more work down the line, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, what can a partner do during this discovery strategy and kickoff? What can they do to try to make sure that they're doing everything possible from their side to make sure things are going smoothly, that they'll end up being on time and on budget? What are the important things from the partner side on that?
So putting together really as much information as possible on their end about whatever we're trying to build. So, for example, we're onboarding a new client now that they have an existing mobile application, and we are going to be rebuilding slash re-architecting it. So taking pieces of what they've done and basically using some old code that they have and also figuring out how to make it a much better, more stable product for the next few months, so short term as well as long term. And for us, we have it's a decent size project. There's on our side we have 4 iOS developers and 4 Android developers. And for us to get up to speed, it takes a bit. So we have to review the code. So we need to get access to the code, and then from there to understand like the full functionality of the product. Ideally, we have um, either user stories or wireframes or fully annotated design that's really clear, that really explains the journey of how you navigate through the actual application. Um, with this application, different there's subscriptions, there's different pieces in the app where it's hard to actually like test and see that. So like getting test accounts to get past certain screens and areas. Um, this is a healthcare product, so everything we do has to go through our partner's VPN. So everybody has to be on that and get access to that. So it's pretty. Onboarding process can be pretty complex in a lot of cases. So this is really about a 2 to 4 week onboarding to get us up to speed, and it helps if like the partner has everything documented and ready to go, and really has us ready to like see all the information and tooling that we need. So like with this app, I mean, kind of like I said, there's the code, there's the design, and then from there, there's all the existing tools. So like they have like a tool for A/B testing. They have a tool for crash logs. They have a tool for um, automated testing. They have a tool for um, generating like different accounts, like demo accounts. It's really kind of endless in terms of like what we can walk into if there's an existing product or existing code there. So it's a lot of kind of getting up to speed of what's there, understanding that, and then figuring out the best path forward for both the short-term goals as well as the long-term goals. So that's where we come in and architect the plan that is going to make sense for like, hey, we need to hit this, we have this event or this thing or whatever it may be in 6 months, and we need to get there. But in 3 years, we want this to be this super maintainable code base that we don't have to spend a year refactoring every time there's major updates to iOS or Android.
Yeah, that's great. And so once you get through that discovery and that strategy, that kind of initial, onboarding, what does it look like, kind of that ongoing, development and design, process and cycles? What do those look like, and how can partners best work with you guys effectively on a regular basis?
Yep. So everybody's different at the end of the day. So sometimes we're doing just development, sometimes just design, sometimes both. And then sometimes if it's a new product, a lot of times it's in more of a kind of waterfall fashion. So we're doing things more linear. So we're going through discovery and strategy, um, like user stories, user flows, wireframes, then branding, design, and then development, DevOps, and deployment. So everything is really those kind of more or less 4 steps are done linear, and like we'll see the full design before we start development, or at least we'll see 75% of the design before we start development, so we can kind of build the architecture from the front end of the app or website, whatever it may be, as well as the back end. Um, and then in other cases, a lot of times we get into more of a agile type format where we have more or less 2 week sprints. And once again, same idea. If we're doing design, development, QA, etc., we'll usually stagger them where we have the initial design sprint starting, and then 2 weeks after that, the initial development sprint of that design goes into play, and then goes into a repetitive process where we keep having design development sprints. Kind of they stagger, usually 2 to 4 weeks behind, depending on how complex the actual development of each task each task and or tasks are. Um, but it's set up in a manner where we are continuously shipping or can ship if our partner wants, or if we want new features out every 2 weeks, in that cadence. But sometimes we also will actually ship on if there's a set number of features that we want to get through, and that's like, say, 4 sprints. So basically, 2 months we'll get through all those features, and then ship at the end of the 2 months, and then just continually iterate and repeat.
Yeah. And so, what are some of the things where maybe clients can kind of like bottleneck this development process or these cycles? I imagine a lot of people would be loving to ship every 2 weeks, but I imagine there's also input and need from the partner side on that. And so I'm curious, for partners, what do they need to do from their side to make that possible, or what bottlenecks could they actually create in that?
Yep. So recently, actually, there's been a handful of bottlenecks regarding, so we're coding a platform, developing a platform, whatever it may be, and a lot of times we're relying on a third party for something. So a recent project, we there was video calling in it, and we're leveraging a third party for that functionality. So just we need our partner to go set that account up and give us access. So like going through that vendor review process, making sure they're the right partner. Doing that takes a little bit of time, and then now, like, a lot of times it's in our partner's hands to execute those contracts, work with their legal team as well as the vendor's legal team, and sometimes that could take weeks and bottleneck us. So that has like, right now we have a couple projects that are kind of stuck in that state where it's not really our partner's fault. It's kind of, it just is what it is. So we kind of account for it, but um, it's hard to deal with sometimes because we plan, and then you kind of have to just deal with it. Other cases are like, if like we discussed this with like Audio Mac a fair amount, like just actively iterating with all of their different ad networks. If there's like a new update, it may that may be much higher priority versus a different feature. So we'll be in the middle of a sprint and a new ad network comes in. We have to push everything else aside and put that ad network in, and then ship a release. So then that just changed that sprint completely, and didn't we had to pause the feature that we're working on for, say, two days to put that new ad network in, but and then ship a new build within that week span. But it depends. So that's like a business. Both of these are like business slash tech cases. There's so many different things that just come up. So like the ad example, that's a business case. Will generate more revenue, which is better and good for um, everybody at the end of the day. If the product's performing well, it's going to be good for the end users as well as our partner. And then just dealing with getting new functionality and things of that nature in the project, like video calling. It takes some time, and like getting the right vendors is always it's always like, you got to go through the process, and it, like, especially with certain applications, they need to be with their healthcare related, they need to be HIPAA compliant. If they're also global, they have to be GDPR compliant. Like there's a number of different just hurdles that we have to go through, and it does stall, and it's always expected to take maybe a week, but it takes three, and you kind of have to just deal with it.
Yeah, so one thing that comes to mind with this is with all of these different moving parts, so many things that can bottleneck a project. How do you think about, I guess, project management and communication with partners? How do you set up those communications, those kind of project management channels, and how do you just ensure to keep those lines open to be able to, I guess, be proactively communicating about these types of things?
Yep. So pretty much all of our um, pretty much every partner we work with, we share our project management systems, so like they can see what's happening in real time. As like if a developer moves a ticket, they can see it, and they can add to the board in terms of like a new feature to the backlog that they want to add based on like maybe customer feedback or anything. We add new stuff as design gets done, it gets added and reviewed in there. Like everything's pretty um, out in the open. There are a handful that don't need to really or request access, but they just really want to see like, all right, once you finish the sprint, I want to see the design for um, the dashboard and the user profile or something, whatever it may be. They just want to see the end deliverable and not really like the progression, and then we iterate from there. Um, but it's really like a good PM system, and then just like if something happens of that nature where like a new ad network came in, like I said, it's just like, okay, this is gonna like it's we assess it. All right, this is gonna take us probably 2, 3, 4 days, whatever it ends up being, to put in. Like it's gonna take one developer, two developers to do it. They're currently working on features A and B individually. We're gonna have to pause. What do we want? What's the best outcome here? What do we pause for that period of time that isn't going to affect the product at the like highest level? So it's just a shuffling and figuring it out. Like that's really what it comes down to, and being able to kind of um, be as nimble as possible and context switch when something comes up. So and maybe it is like I pull another developer from off another project for those 2 days to handle the the overload, and that has worked in the past.
Yeah. So I'm curious then, from the communication standpoint, how often do you typically do calls with partners? What should people expect? Do you guys kind of tailor it to each partner's preferences, or how do you think about kind of the ongoing communication cadences?
So everything is tailored to each partner. So we have daily stand-ups where they're video calls, and then like they're really full agile, full scrum, where we're doing all the different ceremonies in terms of like daily stand-up, retrospectives, grooming, like really full process, where it's a lot of meetings that take our time to just plan and things of that nature, and figure out how we can do better. And that's just how like a lot of our partners or some of our partners work, and that's just their process, and we just fit into the process. And then there's others where we follow the same principles, practices, but it's more done via like Slack or something of that nature, where you just post what you're working on that day. Like, what'd you do yesterday? What'd you do today? Are there any blockers? And then that gives everybody insight into what you're doing. And then as like the product manager or project manager, you can just look at the board and see what's happening. Um, so I personally am more of a fan of the latter, because then we're developers' time's not getting sucked into meetings, and they're more focused on moving the product along. Um, But it just depends. It depends on how complicated something is, depends on how good the initial ticket writing is, depends on time zone differences. Like we have some developers that are in Europe, and then we have some clients that are in Silicon Valley, and you're talking like a 9 hour difference. Um, so the scheduling is just almost impossible sometimes. There's only like a few hour window there where it makes sense, where someone's not either getting up at 5 a.m. or staying up till 9 p.m. plus, which just depends on the person's work schedule. Um, so, I mean, at the end of the day, to get right to your question, it's different for everybody. Not everyone has a different process. Everyone, some are more lax, some are more strict and like have to get followed for like reporting purposes, like for them internally and things of that nature. So it's really a case by case basis, but um, it's kind of funny. Like some of like our biggest projects when we were all in office. We were only like two subway stops away, and we like I would joke with one of our partners that I'm like I only see you guys during like our holiday parties, and you're so close. We do everything virtually, so it's just it's the way of the kind of the way of the world and how it works. It just sometimes it's easier just to hop on a video call versus take going two subway stops. But we did change that eventually to just do a monthly meeting in person. But for years we just did everything virtually. Um, but whatever works really at the end of the day, that's all that matters.
That's great. And so another question, I guess, would be around this idea of just kind of how having partners understand the impact of their decisions. And we've kind of hit on this a little bit, but things, whenever you've got your vision, your strategy in place, and then maybe they want to add a feature or they want to change the scope or they want to accelerate something. How should partners be thinking about that if they want to start deviating from that, the original plan you guys put in place?
So it definitely depends on how much of a deviation and what is changing. So and also like how we're working with them. About like just from like a billing perspective, in all honesty, like I'll start there because that's where it's complicated if there's a scope change. Um, so if we're doing like a fixed bid project, which is like maybe 5 or 10% of our clients, it requires a full scope change. Like maybe like sometimes it's all right. We want to remove this feature, but we want to add this. So it's pretty easy to just swap it out because they're similar in hours. And but if we're time and materials, which is like 90% of our clients, um, it's very easy for us to just be like, okay, that's gonna change this and take X amount of hours. So we predict this to take 2 more weeks. And they're like, okay. And will give us the green light or red light depending on the time. So there's just a bit more flexibility when we have like um, when it's time materials and it's less focused on like a super scoped feature set, and it's more nimble when we're iterating on a product for months and years. Um, it's similar to before. It's just like being like, all right, that's going to push us back X amount of time, or we need to add an X number of new people or Y number of new people, because that will allow us to do this in parallel to what we're already doing, um, um, or we have to just shift resources off of what we're currently doing. So
Okay, that's great. And so, want to also then discuss, we've hit on some of these throughout, but I'd like to go like, what are some of the biggest areas where your partners maybe kind of create problems or they maybe make road necks or bottlenecks? Like, what are things that like I'm trying to be a good partner here, like don't do this. Like, what are some of the things that are, or try to avoid or mitigate it. I know some of these things can't always be avoided, but what are some of the biggest areas that partners can look out for in terms of just roadnecks or bottlenecks in the process?
Yeah, I think what we always push for in discovering strategy is getting as much information out of our partners on the onset. So like the version one or whatever the initial like milestone that we're working on, it may have 20 features, but what is your like end all be all goal? So that may be 100 plus features that you have in your head or written down in a backlog. So the more of that we understand, the better. So we can plan for that from like a technology architecture as well as like a design architecture. So understanding the long term goals so we can help reverse engineer that definitely helps. And then when we're like in the product and really going through our phases, it's a lot of um, just quick feedback. Like we shoot for like 48, 72 hour feedback. But it depends. Sometimes it's not realistic if it's a larger entity where like it has to go through multiple chains of review. But then there's other cases where it's like we will send something over, then it's a yes within an hour. So prompt feedback definitely helps. There's another another partner we're working with now that we're once again delayed on getting account set up for us to actually move forward. So we've been kind of stagnant for almost 4 weeks now, just because they're delayed on setting up a number of different accounts that we need to actually move forward. So that like has been a really huge bottleneck, and it completely blew up our full timeline. So like we were supposed to deliver by December, but it's just not possible now because they've been uh, kind of dragging their feet a bit on this account creation. So it's hurting us a bit. Those are the like major things when it comes to like my mind. It's really like the quick feedback, and then I guess that's if like we're sending them something. But if we are relying on a partner for something, like if they're doing like the back end development, they, as long as they're on time and they deliver what we need and the timeline or when we expect it, we're good. But say a back end API isn't ready and um, it's a few weeks late, that affects our timeline and our staffing of the project in terms of who is going to do the web front end or the iOS or Android front end, like API integration or the new API integration, whatever it may be. So it's more about just like time management, a lot of like just keeping in touch as much as possible. And we know something is delaying and going like going to be going slow on either side. Um, but a lot of times you don't know until you get into it, and then there's a problem when you're 3/4 of the way through it or whatever it may be comes up, or something. It may be something that, hey, what if we want to add this extra little bell and whistle to it or something like that, and it ends up taking more time and they need more review time or whatever it may be, or to think about it more if they want to do it. Um, so there's so many different areas, but I would say those are some of the most common.
That's great. And so, as we wrap up here, one of the last questions I like to ask is, what message or what would you like to say just for all of the incoming partners, people that are about to start working with you guys and everything? Just what general advice would you have just to make sure that they kick things off and things go well?
Really, just try to have as much documented as possible. So I'm talking to a new potential partner now, and they know what they want in their head, but they don't have it on paper. And it's a they're a fairly early stage startup. I think they just raised their Series A, but they're doing well. But they're a bit new to digital, and and especially the like mobile and web and desktop app space, and that's what they're really looking for, to advance their service and their current offering. And I'm like, I need you guys to really just write everything down that you could think of, and like over deliver what, you want us to do. Like over articulate, over like the more information we have, the better. Even if it'll take us longer to sift through everything, the more we have, the better, in terms of understanding. And then from there, it's like just being available as much as possible when we need to be. I mean, we're not going to request someone to have a call like, hey, I need you to talk to me like an hour from now. But it's more like just being available for, calls throughout different milestones and different, um, points in the project and product for us to check in and make sure everything's going smoothly. And then if there is a hiccup or whatever it may be, it's just like, how do we get around this? Why did it happen? What's going on to resolve it? And just work like very collaboratively. That's really how we work in a lot of cases. It's a lot of kind of like we are more or less like augmenting each other in some capacity, where like they are the subject matter experts in terms of their business and their industry, where they need to dump that information on us, and we are the subject matter experts in terms of like building digital products and excelling in that arena. So we got to kind of merge the two together and kind of give each other as much information as possible to then make the best possible outcome, and continually build on that, to make the what we build together better and better and better. So
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you very much for taking the time on this, Sean. This was phenomenal.
yeah, of course.